Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Chalk Talk. I'm Matt Morris, and joined, as always, by Scott Procter and Lucas Semb. And we're going to start out with the NFL once again this week. So after a big Thanksgiving loss, 41-25, to the Houston Texans, the Detroit Lions have decided to move on from head coach Matt Patricia, ending his short and very unexciting head coaching term with the Lions. And the Lions now join the Atlanta Falcons and the Houston Texans as teams that are looking for head coaches moving into the offseason. So what we're going to ask first is, who should the Detroit Lions go after? Scott, who is your pick?
Sure thing, man. First off, this decision was long overdue. The Detroit Lions are 13-29-1 under Matt Patricia and will have a losing season now for the third straight year. He had to go, simple as that, especially when GM Bob Quinn, who was also let go with Patricia, fires Jim Caldwell after the 2017 season after back-to-back 9-7 years. But here's where Lions ownership can make this thing right. Hire Eric Bieniemy. The Kansas City Chiefs offensive coordinator should already be a head coach somewhere, so the Lions would be silly not to make a serious push for him. Bieniemy's been calling plays the NFL's most potent and explosive offense, and is at least partially responsible for the evolution of the game's best player in Patrick Mahomes. Bieniemy's been under the tutelage of Andy Reid, who's believed to be one of the best coaches and offensive minds in the league, and Bieniemy is also viewed that way in many NFL circles as well. Matt Patricia was a defensive-minded coach, obviously coming from the Belichick coaching tree, but the Detroit Lions need to go in the opposite direction. The NFL is an offensive and quarterback-driven league, and those are two areas that Bieniemy is simply just an expert in. Handing him the keys to a Detroit franchise that, one, already has a franchise-caliber quarterback in Matt Stafford, and two, has the requisite young offensive weapons, as in Kenny Golladay, a St. Rita alum, shout out St. Rita on the south side of Chicago, TJ Hawkinson, DeAndre Swift, and other young guys like that. This is exactly what needs to happen. Bieniemy is the guy. Luke, what do you think on that? Where do you stand?
No, I like Bieniemy. I think my only knock on him is that, it's really easy to look like a genius when, the Chiefs have all those weapons and you have Mahomes who can just air it out to Tyreek Hill. But he's very creative, let alone what the player's able to do. He's able to really give them opportunities to make those plays. So I like your pick, but I'm going to look in a different direction. I think the Lions should look towards the college ranks for a first-time NFL coach, and that's the way the league is going. You see guys like Cliff Kingsbury, Matt LaFleur, Zach Taylor. These guys are all young. They connect with their athletes and understand the modern game. That being said, I think it's time to give Lincoln Riley an NFL opportunity. For one reason for me is how he gets the most out of his QBs. He maximized Kyler Murray in his system, and now he's making the most out of a true freshman in Spencer Rattler, who's been very impressive in his own right with 22 touchdowns this year. And personally, I think the Lions have a great QB in Stafford, a very gifted QB, whether we like to say it or not. You saw Aaron Rodgers earlier this week giving him credit for being creative, being able to make sidearm throws and do things that a lot of QBs aren't able to do. Whatever it is, I think Riley could maximize his talent there. And like you said, they have the weapons. They have DeAndre Swift. He's a little injured right now with the concussion. They have Kenny Golladay. They have some pieces that you can build around. I think Lincoln Riley could really come in there and give that unit some energy.
No, I understand, and I see that both of you guys went offense, so I'm going to switch it up, and I'm going to go defense, because I think that obviously this is an offensive-driven league nowadays, and you don't see as many defensive-minded head coaches really making big moves or being as successful. But, Mike Vrabel down in Tennessee, Mike Zimmer in Minnesota, the Vikings are having a little bit of an off year, but Zimmer's, reign as their head coach has been great, and that defense has been stout. And Brian Flores, with a young Tua Tagovailoa, is playing great, and that defense is the reason they're winning right now. So I'm going to stick on defense, and I think that Detroit needs a defensive guy, and my guy is Robert Saleh, the defensive coordinator out with the 49ers. Last year, his defense was elite, second technically to the Patriots, but I think anybody could argue that was the best defense in the league. Helped the 49ers get to the Super Bowl and unfortunately lose to Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. But this year in particular is really where he's showing how good of a coach he is. Obviously, you got to give a lot of credit to Shanahan as the head coach, still getting the 49ers, competitive with all the injuries. But there's been a lot of injuries on defense. And they needed this defense to step up because the offense is lacking basically all of their main weapons. And so basically what Saleh has done is he has not given any excuses. Richard Sherman, after the win against the LA Rams this last weekend, praised Saleh for, not having enough credit or being given enough credit, not just in San Francisco, but the whole league. This is a guy who gives a lot of energy. He gets the team to buy into what they're doing, believe that they can win. And let's be honest, Detroit hasn't had something like that in a long time. There's never really been a guy to come in and really make Detroit buy into, hey, we're good. Like, we can do this. And I think Robert Saleh has that energy and that ability to coach up a team that Detroit needs right now. And also, Matt Patricia, it failed. He tried to turn this into a New England Patriots type of team. He tried to run it like Belichick, and guys weren't having fun. And you know what the interim head coach for Detroit said that he was going to focus on the rest of the season? Having fun. You know who could bring a lot of fun and a lot of energy to this Detroit team? Robert Saleh. He always looks like he's having fun on those sidelines. So that's why I'm going to go with Robert Saleh, and I'm going to go defense, especially in an NFC North where, defense kind of reigns as far as you got to go up against the Bears, you got to go up against the Vikings, and you got to figure out how to stop Aaron Rodgers. You're going to need defense.
I really like that you brought up the NFC North, and I also really like both of you guys' picks, but let me nitpick a little bit. Matt, I really like Saleh, but again, as I mentioned, the Lions went down the defensive path with Patricia. It didn't work out. They really don't have any defensive talent on that roster as of right now. Really, all their talent's on the offensive side of the ball, and that's why I think you need to bring in a coach like Eric Bieniemy. And this is a more important decision for me because the way I see it, the NFC North is up for grabs here moving forward. It's obviously Green Bay's division now, but you don't necessarily look at the Bears and Vikings and think, wow, they're set up to be really good here in the near future. So, and then to Luke's pick, don't hire a developmental coach. Matt LaFleur is really kind of the first young NFL head coach, rather, to kind of hit the ground running. But even Cliff Kingsbury, it took a year or two for his system to set in, for him to get, the talent around him that he needs to succeed. But, the biggest thing, don't hire a developmental coach. Hire a sure thing, and that's what Eric Bieniemy is, in my opinion.
I want to make one last comment about that. I think, if there is ever a time to hire a developmental coach, it would be right now because, the Lions are not a win-now team, and they're probably not a win-now team within the next 5 years. Right now would be the time where you bring in a guy who can build a culture, help you with your next 3, 4, 5 drafts and get guys that he wants, and then you can start to see that reformation happen.
Listen, Detroit is still Detroit, so we never really know what's going to happen with them. But we're going to stay in the NFL, and we want to move on to something because there was some history made over the weekend. This is the first time in the NFL where they have had 3 quarterbacks with 30-plus passing TDs through 12 weeks. And those are obviously Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, and Russell Wilson. So with the last few weeks coming up in the NFL season, who's your quarterback? Who are you picking out of those 3? Because obviously they're all elite, but we got to have some fun and argue who's going to be the one to take. Scott, who you got?
Sure, man. I'm keeping it consistent here with the Kansas City Chiefs love. And Patrick Mahomes is the obvious choice with much, 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 much love and respect to Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. Now, I'll start here and say that the only legitimate knock on Patrick Mahomes is the embarrassment of riches he has at his disposal in terms of weapons. Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, McCole Hardman, Sammy Watkins. You got Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Le'Veon behind you, and Andy Reid and Bieniemy calling plays. It's entirely too fair, especially when you have a talent like Patrick running the show. But on the flip side of that, if you give Patrick Mahomes, Devontae Adams, or if you give him DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, I think it will be just fine. But, simply Patrick is the best player in the NFL. I've said this, regardless of position. He has an MVP, a Super Bowl and Super Bowl MVP. He's only been a starter for 2 seasons now in his 3rd. He has 30 touchdowns and just 2 interceptions this season for a team that's head and shoulders better than everybody else. He will hit the trifecta this season, winning the MVP, Super Bowl, and Super Bowl MVP. So he's the guy that you want on your team above all else. Luke?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned all the weapons that he has at his disposal before I had to. Like you said, though, that's the only knock, and I'm not going to discredit Pat Mahomes. He is incredible, but I still like Russell Wilson here. I think, in primetime, he delivers. He's 10-2 in Monday Night Football starts. That's the best record all time in QBs with at least 10 Monday night starts. And that's more than that ties his entire draft class of QBs. They have 10 combined, and that's names like Andrew Luck, Kirk Cousins, Ryan Tannehill, Nick Foles. And he still has to play teams. Well, I guess this doesn't matter, but I think he still has a chance to win, an outside chance to win the MVP. He still has to play the Jets, the Giants, the football team. He's got a chance to pad his stats, but he's also just got a lot of swagger. He's a guy that leads the team vocally and on the field, and I like what he does on the ground the most. Between him and Mahomes, I think Mahomes is a great improviser and makes crazy plays. You see him throw no looks. You see him make sidearm throws. I just think Wilson can really improvise and move it forward with his feet.
As my very, great guy, Stephen A. Smith would say, give me that bad man up in Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers, 3,100 passing yards this year, leads the league in throwing touchdowns with 33. He has an 85.2 passer rating on the season. That is second in the league. And he's Pro Football Focus's #1 ranked QB. And you talk about weapons, he's had barely anybody, and he's made them look amazing. Obviously, you have Devontae Adams, but there's been some injuries there. You have Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams, but those are running backs, and they're great in the passing game. But who are his other wide receivers? He's helped make Allen Lazard an awesome wide receiver and almost a #2. He's made MVS look great at times. Malik Taylor, Darius Shepard. They're bringing in Tavon Austin because you know what? He'll make him look great too, even though he's finishing up the rest of his career.
Robert Tonyan.
Hey, don't forget.
Legitimate tight end.
Don't forget Tonyan too. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Tonyan is a legitimate tight end.
Tonyan and Sternberger have been playing great, but it's because Rodgers is throwing the ball. And those guys are all awesome. But he is in charge of that offense. Him and Matt LaFleur have figured it out in year 2. They are playing great together. And one thing of this season in particular that I'll take that makes him stand out above the rest is his cadence. There's no fans. He can hard count you. I mean, honestly, if he wanted to move the ball down the field, he doesn't even have to hike it. All he has to do is get false starts, 5-yard penalties, 5-yard penalties, 5-yard penalties all day. He is the master at doing that. And
if we're picking QBs that we want though, this year I'm not picking a guy because of his hard count. That's not going to move. That's not going to move the
things that take him above and beyond because he has everything else too. He has everything else too.
And they're bringing in Tavon Austin because all you need is a guy to throw the long ball to with Rodgers, and Tavon Austin has wheels.
Absolutely. He's going for his 3rd MVP. So when we come back, we're going to stay on the gridiron. We're going to keep talking football. We're going to go to the college football playoff because they released the first ranking, and we obviously have to talk about that. We're Chalk Talk, and we'll be back in a second. We're back with Chalk Talk, and we're talking college football playoff. As of right now, it looks like it's going to be Bama at 1, Notre Dame at 2, Clemson at 3, and Ohio State at 4. And it seems like that's going to be what it is for the rest of the season. But as always, there's a few teams that have a sliver of a chance to make it in, and we're going to pick our favorites on who we think has a chance to make it in and who we would love to see make it in as a dark horse. So, Scott, I know you've been talking a long time about this team, and you're about to go back at it. Feels like you're starting to beat a dead horse, though.
Perhaps. We'll see, though. I mean, starting off, I think the College Football Committee got the top 4 teams right. But I can't even give them credit for a job well done because of the disservice they've done to BYU. Again, we're talking about a 9-0 team who spent 4 consecutive weeks in the AP Top 10, now ranked number 14 in the initial college football poll. Behind 3 teams with 2 losses. It's a disgrace. This is the crazy part to me. According to Vegas odd makers, BYU would be favored over Indiana. I have it right here. Iowa State, Miami, Northwestern, and Texas A&M. All teams ranked ahead of BYU. They would have a 50-50 chance to beat Georgia and Cincinnati and would be less than 10-point underdogs against Notre Dame, Clemson, Ohio State, Florida, and Oklahoma. All those teams are inexplicably ranked ahead of BYU. Alabama is the only team that would be a heavy favorite over BYU, according to Vegas, again, just like anybody would. Listen,
That's why Vegas and those types of predictions are just dumb. I mean, you're never going to change my opinion. You never get changed my opinion on this. It's just if any of those teams actually square it off. I mean, BYU, I got them as 21-point dogs.
Well, Vegas doesn't. So anyway, listen, I get the strength of schedule argument, but the committee is simply ignoring facts at this point. BYU has been dominant all season and not just in results. We always talk about the eye test. How about what this team is doing week in, week out, dominating the line of scrimmage against whoever they play, especially at the line of scrimmage up front. And they have the superstar quarterback in Zach Wilson, who's having a Heisman caliber type season. This is something that I've talked about on multiple occasions. And this is the last point before I hand it to you guys. Georgia is number 9 right now, ranked 5 spots ahead of BYU with 2 losses. Georgia has only beat one team this season with a winning record, and that's Auburn. Georgia's wins have come against teams with a combined record of 15-22. So is it really about who teams have played? The college football committee should be ashamed of themselves. Go ahead.
All I have to say is that I hope somehow, some way we get a matchup with BYU and one of the teams you just named, because I'm going to Vegas. I'm going to catch myself a bag. Anyways, my college football dark horse is going to be Florida. Kyle Trask has 34 touchdowns and just 3 interceptions this year, looking well on his way to a Heisman. Matt, you might have been onto something when we last talked about that. He has Kyle Pitts looking like Rob Gronkowski out there. This is the closest thing to a Brady-Gronk connection I've ever seen in college football. They lost to Texas A&M, who's currently ranked 5 by just 3 points. And they beat up on Georgia, and they still have to play LSU. Regardless of record, it's always a tough game and an impressive win. LSU's LSU, but it might come down to that SEC championship, who can get in. Texas A&M still has to play Auburn, which if they win, that might solidify them ahead of Florida. But I like Florida's pieces and the remaining schedule. I trust Trask, but if Florida can get into that SEC championship game, I think that they could, if they get an upset win there, they could sneak in.
Oh, absolutely. And it's going to be interesting. And Trask is my guy to win the Heisman. I love what they're doing down in Florida. I'd love to see an Alabama-Florida SEC championship. But, Scott, I agree with you too. BYU definitely got screwed in those rankings. I have them at 8. And you know who I have at 7? Because I think Texas A&M and Florida deserve to be 5 and 6. And then you know who I have at 7 is Cincinnati. I agree with where they are, and I think that they're the team that could sneak in because – although they aren't in a Power 5, you know what they've done? They've beaten teams that are ranked top 25. They beat SMU earlier this season as ranked 16th. In their last game this year is against Tulsa, who's ranked in the top 25. They're coming off an impressive win against UCF just last week, and they are in the top 20 in both offense and defense. Offense, they're 13th. Defense, they're 3rd in the nation. Cincinnati is a great team. They're looking like they're going to go undefeated, and if they go undefeated, they're going to win the American Athletic Conference, and they'll have 2 top 25 wins, which is more than a lot of teams can say, to your point, Scott. So I think if we're going to pick a team that isn't in a Power 5 conference that deserves to be one of those top 4 teams at the end of the season, it has to be Cincinnati.
But Matt, by this college football logic and this Lucas Semb logic, a non-Power 5 team can't be one of the top 4 teams. Listen, don't get my position twisted. I don't believe BYU is a top 4 team as of right now as it stands. But you cannot convince me that there are 13 better teams as of the first initial college football playoff poll, better than BYU. At least they're a top 10 team. They're a top 10 team. They've been dominant all year. They have the superstar at the most important position. They've blown out everybody they played but one opponent. It's simply ignorance, and it's disrespectful as far as I'm concerned. BYU has an open date next week. I hope there can be a way that they can figure out at least a way to, if not play a ranked team, at least play a Power 5 team just to shut some people up. And I'd love to see it. The disrespect is really getting unreal.
I think you guys are just buying into that media hype. I don't know how many times I have to say it. These recruits go to these schools for certain reasons. I mean, a BYU offensive lineman, I don't know the stats for sure. I'm just saying a BYU offensive lineman might be 6'2", 300 pounds. And then they're going to be going against guys likewise in size, and then you go and play against like an Ohio State or a Florida, and you're gonna have to be blocking 6'6", 6'7", 350-pound NFL athletes. There is no comparison.
No, Luke. You know what? I'm gonna call. That's not true, because I remember watching an NFL level caliber Wisconsin Badgers O-line and D-line get embarrassed by Andy Dalton, the Red Rifle, and a TCU Horned Frogs team that came in and won the Rose Bowl. They literally did a comparison. I remember this. This is ingrained in my head. They did a comparison of the offensive line versus TCU's defensive line. They had like 120 pounds on all of them, and they still lost. It doesn't matter the size and all of that. I'm going to go with Scott on that and just say that to compare that height and size, guys play up. They play up to what they're going up against, and they can be coached to be better. And BYU is still a respectable program that has had success in the past as well. And one final thought before we wrap this all up and we move on to college basketball, UCF a few years ago went undefeated, and they felt like they got, they earned something, and they didn't.
Look at them now.
That late. They beat Auburn, Boise State.
Look at them now.
Hey, this is all I'm going to say. The years where they said that they should have been in the top 4, or they should have gotten a better, more credit, they end up beating a Power 5 team that they were supposed to lose to in a bowl. Boise State did it. UCF did it. And you know what? This year, I think BYU and Auburn and Cincinnati are going to do it during the bowls, because they're not going to be able to get into the college football playoff.
You know, it'd be a good matchup for you guys for BYU. It'd be Hugh Freeze and the Liberty Flames. That's a ranked team that they'll match up with well, and that's a ranked team they could.
Yeah, and this is the disrespect I'm talking about. And man, I'm really glad that you brought up past, kind of outside the Power 5 schools that have, kind of made a case to be one of the top, 10 or so teams in the country. BYU, this is not a program that's come out of nowhere when we're talking about football prominence. They've been around. They've been a respectable program for as long as I've been alive. They now have a superstar at the quarterback position. Zach Wilson is going to play in the NFL. He's going to play on Sundays in the near future.
They get a good player, and their fans don't know how to act.
We're going to head to college basketball, but we're going to come back to this in, a month, and I'll be holding the plate of crow that you can eat when BYU or Cincinnati wins. When we come back, we'll be talking college basketball. We're back with Chalk Talk, and we're talking college basketball. It has finally taken off last week, and we already saw some really great games. Kentucky losing to Richmond in an upset. We saw University of San Francisco coming in and getting a big win against Virginia. And so obviously with some of these upsets and with how crazy of an offseason it was for all these college basketball teams, we got to talk. Who are our contenders and who are the pretenders? We're going to talk pretenders right now. So, Scott, who is your pretender? As it is very early in the season, but we obviously got to talk pretenders in the top 10.
For sure, man. Very early in the season, as you said. But I'm going right near the top here and looking at number 3, Iowa. The ranking matches Iowa's highest of the Fran McCaffrey area, and I don't believe it'll last long. Luke Garza is a hooper and likely a big reason for the high ranking. He's obviously the reigning Big Ten Player of the Year. He's a double-double machine with real range for his size. But I see a team who has been and will be too reliant on one man. And as you creep into conference play and into March, that just typically doesn't win you games, especially when I look around the Big Ten and I see other top 10 teams like Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan State, who I believe to be more well-rounded. How is a team that went 20-11 and finished 8th in the Big Ten last season, all of a sudden a top 5 team with no major upgrades? Now, Iowa plays number 14 North Carolina next week, and then number 1 Gonzaga the following weekend, which are great opportunities for them. But I think they'll land outside the top 15 here in a couple weeks, and I believe that's kind of where they'll hover for most of the season here. I don't envision Iowa winning the Big Ten or being the conference's best team at season's end, so it's hard for me to accept the number 3 ranking right now. What say you, Matt?
I say I go Big 12. I'm going to move from the Big 10 to the Big 12, and I'm going to say Kansas. I mean, obviously Kansas has always been a powerhouse. They're usually at the top of the list. But I think that this year in particular, they have a lot of young talent. They have a lot of young guys coming in. And although it was just one game and it was against top-ranked Gonzaga, that youth showed. And I think that you saw a team that still has a lot of growing to do. And I'm not sure they're going to grow fast enough to really make, to stay in the top 10, especially in the tough Big 12 this year, where you got teams like Baylor, who are clearly one of the favorites right now. So I think Bill Self will figure it out as he always does. But I think right now they're going to be very guard heavy this year after being, fairly more of a big man team with guys like Azubuike last year. And they're going to have to find kind of their way of doing it. And another, mainstay of Bill Self and a Kansas Jayhawk team is they have great defense, and they pride themselves on being a very tough defensive team. They gave up 102 to Gonzaga. And Gonzaga is great, but 102 is, something that that's a lot of work that they have ahead of them. And I'm not going to say here that Kansas is done or anything crazy like that, but over the next few weeks and over the next month and a half, it's going to take time, and Kansas is going to stumble a little bit more before they really get their feet underneath them and they can, finish the season strong in a Big 12 and in March Madness. Luke, it seems like you've been talking to us and you're pretty passionate about your take here. So I'm going to give you the floor and let you carry this away.
All right. And I do want to mention real quick about what you're talking about, the Big 12 with lots of good teams this year. And don't forget Oklahoma State with Cade Cunningham. That's just a whole new ball game there, because they're typically not that great of a team. But now the number one, projected draft pick, they're going to make some noise. But again, I'm going to go back over to the Big Ten, like you said, and I have to take the Wisconsin Badgers. Every year, big hype, and they don't live up to it every single year, and I'm sick of it. And I don't want to have to double dip here, but it's the same way with their football team. They're all just regular season warriors, and it's very, very hard to watch. Last time they were truly good, they had Kaminsky and Decker, and they made the Final Four, and those were two NBA players, and they rarely ever have NBA players. They never win anything meaningful. Their Big Ten foe, Illinois, is at number 5 right now behind them, and Illinois is going to beat Wisconsin 8 out of 10 times. Last year, they lost to New Mexico. They lost to Richmond. They lost to Rutgers. They lost to Purdue. They lost to St. Mary's. Greg Gard is not your guy there. They need to revamp instead of being stuck winning regular season awards. The swing is not going to win you anything in today's college basketball. They have a great incoming class at number 8 in the nation, but I feel bad for those guys, man. We saw Kobe King transfer last year, and I feel like the same thing might happen in the future.
Luke, I'm with you there on, the swing offense and, kind of old school style of running things. And it's true. Wisconsin just doesn't attract the big time recruits that these blue chip programs like Kansas and Kentucky do. But I completely reject the idea that Wisconsin is a constant underachiever. I would argue the opposite. Matter of fact, I feel like Wisconsin is consistently, actually, year in, year out, especially into March, over-exceeded expectations for, again, going back to the same point that they typically don't have the top recruits. They typically don't have the best players on the court, but yet they find ways to be at the top of the Big Ten, win Big Ten championships, go deep into March, make March Madness runs. So I completely reject that idea. And
I do not care about a Big Ten championship. I do not care. You can hang all those rafters, hang them whenever you want. I don't care about a Big Ten championship, because every year they're getting ranked like this, number 4 in the nation, and you got to do.
How often is Wisconsin ranked top 5?
I don't know. I don't have here. Let me pull up my notes real quick. I don't know, man. I'm just telling you. That
wasn't a literal question, but
I'm telling you, every year they have such high praise and they don't do what they should do. The last time they made the Final Four, they had Decker and Kaminsky, and people talk about them doing that kind of thing every year, and it just never, ever, ever happens.
I think that they've had really good runs. Okay, one year after Decker and Kaminsky, they were a Florida buzzer beater away from moving on and going pretty deep into March Madness. You had Showalter doing the belt to Rogers, which I don't know if that's just like 100 cc's of Wisconsin pride right there. So I'm not gonna sell the Badgers short yet. I like Reavers, I like Potter, I like Trice, I like the Davis twins coming in. I think Johnny is going to be a really good freshman, and he's bringing some of that, that fast pace. He loves to run. He is athletic as heck. and he can bring some of that. And I think Gard has shown that he deserves to be, one of the best coaches in the Big Ten, and he'll get those guys going. And they had a lot of momentum heading into the end of the season when everything fell short and it got canceled because of COVID. So they're going to bring that momentum, and it's going to come here. And you know what? When they have the battle at, Highway 94, Marquette versus the Wisconsin at Pfizer Forum, Badgers are going to win, and they're going to win, pretty well. And in the best conference in basketball this year, the Big Ten, I could see the Badgers winning, and I think they can make a deep run.
I had one quick note about what you were saying. Demetric Trice is bad. He is bad. You said he's good. They benched him last year for Trevor Anderson. He was shooting like 30% from the field and had more turnovers and assists at one point. That can't be running
around.
He's
going to step up this year. He'll redeem himself.
Man, I think very important.
I like Davidson too. Brad Davidson is, when he's good, he's good.
It's just an energy guy.
The Badgers have players both in the backcourt and front court that I like and trust. And an important piece that Matt brought up was how they finished the end of last season. Obviously, the Kobe King situation was unfortunate. And it really looked like the Badgers were going to go in a very bad direction after that series of events. But Greg Gard really galvanized the troops there in Madison and really made them a strong finish to the season that was obviously cut short due to the pandemic and whatnot. But the way they finished last season with a lot of those guys returning cannot go unnoticed.
All right. Well, big games this week, so I'm excited to probably talk some more college basketball once there's more than 2 games each team has played. It's going to be a fun season. It's going to be an interesting season. We're going to talk about it a lot more. But this has been Chalk Talk. I'm Matt Morris, as always, with Scott Procter and Lucas Semb. We'll talk to you guys next week.